One of the things that really frustrates me is that because there are so many good comics out there that aren't picked up by TV and radio, and as I say, maybe the reason they're not picked up by TV and radio is because they haven't got the sort of management who are connected with TV and radio or would push them. I feel that the whether the BBC or the ITV or Sky or whoever it is, there aren't enough people from those areas going out there to the clubs, finding acts themselves. They seem more reliant on going to the players already, so the management already who control those acts and saying, who have you got, rather than this is somebody I've found. You know what I mean? It's like if you had somebody or people who were incredibly passionate about comedy out there seeing what's happening now, what's out there in the clubs, and then maybe doing the first circuit shows, I think you might have a different kind of comedy genre TV-wise.
Hello and welcome to the Ask the Industry podcast, episode 55. My name's Simon Caine, and for those of you new to the show, this is the podcast where I interview the most influential people from the worlds of stand-up, comedy, radio, TV, and today, touring. Mick Perrin is the founder of Mick Perrin Worldwide, which is a touring and management agency based out of Brighton, whose first client was Eddie Izzard on his national stadium tour. Since then, they've gone on to work with massive clients, including Dylan Moran and Bill Bailey. So we get into how he got into the business, what keeps him in the business, common touring mistakes indie comedians make, and more. I'm not going to make this a long intro, this is a very quick one, although there is some quick news in terms of our social media output. So, two things. One, if you want to support the show, please join the Facebook group. It really helps out and it allows me to tell you when I've got new guests coming through. And two, I've got a YouTube channel. I've had a YouTube channel for this project for a bit of time, however I've not really used it yet, so I've started to convert these audio interviews into video interviews. They're not actually the video of me and the guest talking. It just means you can listen to it and stream it off of YouTube if you want to, if for whatever reason you can't access it at work in another way. It also makes it another way that you can share the pod, and I was going to just try it as an experiment because it's really hard to sort of stand out and get people to discover the podcast on iTunes, because obviously the front page is not something that everyone uses, but also it's something that is so full of content that means that I'm finding it hard to kind of stand out in that way. And so I thought it might just be an interesting experiment to try and boost the following for this podcast. So if you want to find it, go to YouTube, type in Ask the Industry Podcast. You'll find the YouTube channel there, and I think so far I'll have 10 up by the time this episode goes up. So feel free to check that out, feel free to share that with friends, feel free to subscribe, and that's it really. I'd just like to take a minute and thank you all for all your support recently. It's been really lovely. I've got some new reviews. Please do one if you haven't done one yet. They've all been really fantastic. Just give it an honest review, whatever you think it's worth. It could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stars. Ideally those last two at minimum, but yeah, so that'd be great. Thank you very much for listening. Without any more delays, this is Mick Perrin.
Shield.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I tell you how I was going to start. So essentially what I normally do is for the first question I ask the question and then I ask the person to answer, to include the question in their answer, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So the question was going to be what got you into promoting comedy tours. So if you could say something like I got into comedy promoting tours because, or something like that.
Okay. Can I think about the question each time or what?
Yeah, that's fine. You can edit it down.
That's a very long-winded answer. Or
okay.
I mean, do you how many questions do you have, or are you just going to do a certain amount and see where it goes? Because some of them could be long-winded and some of them could be relatively short.
That's totally fine. Like I can edit it down or I can change it around, and I have let me see.
I mean, is that sort of question is really how did you get into the business?
Yeah, it's just a bit of background information for anyone listening who've never heard of Mick Perrin Worldwide, so that they can kind of get a bit of an understanding as to. I can start a different area if you want. No, it's fine. It's
probably a good place to start because but it's just that the story is quite long and it'll take in quite a few things. Is that all right?
That's fine. Yeah.
Because I've got nowhere else to go with it really. It's such a how did you get in? Well, I didn't just get in. I kind of grew into it from small stages and from the punk bands and all the rest of it, and the whole thing sort of ties in. So it's not a short question.
No, that's fine. The interesting thing for me that's coming out of this is people who've been in the industry 15, 20, 25 years or more. talk about supporting bands. So, for example, I had on Henry Normal yesterday.
Oh yeah.
And he was talking about how he started with being, like an opening act for bands. And we were talking about Porky the Poet, who filled Jupiter's, and how he did that. And I think narrative-wise, it's very interesting for me, but also for people who are gigging now, to understand that, 30 years ago, that's what you did, and how that evolved into a club circuit and then a touring circuit in the way that music was 30 years ago. And I'm sort of interested in a weird way about the parallels of how music touring and supporting yourself as an artist now is 30 years ahead of, I think, where comedy is, because of the fact that music has been so sort of structured in a different way that comedy has, that I think in 30 years' time we'll all be, trying to get a base of, people that like what we're doing in a much more proactive way, rather than sort of hoping that an agent will jump on us and put us on TV or doing that kind of thing. So okay. It doesn't matter if it's not if it's a long story, because it will affect the narrative of the rest
and
of the
then
pod.
Exactly, that's what I was thinking. You can pull any of that or interrupt or whatever and talk about it, because if you feel it's going on too much, because there is a point, but it does meander. But anyway,
that's fine.
Okay,
go for it.
That's the question.
Oh, sorry. How did you get into promoting comedy tours?
How did I get into promoting comedy tours? That's I think it's probably easier to start where I started. And back in the 70s, in the mid 70s, I was a musician. I was basically on the dole, but I was a musician. And various bands were formed in Brighton, various punk bands, and I was playing in several of them. And during that time, there were other friends of mine playing in bands, and after a while they had a great idea to earn extra money by doing street busking in Brighton, and I didn't want to be part of the street busking thing, so I suggested I would go and help them bottle. That's where you collect the money from the punters, or ask for money from the punters, and they were a bunch of guys, and they were collectively called Pookie Snackenberger.
Good name.
It's a very good name. And people who've been going to Edinburgh since the probably early 80s will remember Pookie Snackenberger, as well as another well-known Brighton theatre group called Cliffhanger Theatre. So these guys, Pookie Snackenberger, formed this busking outfit, which was really popular, and they eventually took it to Edinburgh, and they did a show, and they basically won the accolades of Edinburgh, and they coupled that with also doing shows in a place called the Playground in Edinburgh, which was an open area court where they used to busk with Cliffhanger Theatre. And during this time, the likes of Eddie Izzard would be starting out, also doing his busking show. And there's a sort of relevancy here, really. So I stopped playing music and got into production. And then, I learned how to do lighting and sound and production management, and eventually I went on the road with these guys, and we did various dates around the UK and abroad. And then after another couple of years, out of this was formed a show called Stomp, and Stomp was also Brighton based, with two of the original guys who were part of Pookie Snackenberger, and so I stayed on throughout. In between that time, there was also a show called Yes No People. And so if you hear of Stomp, you'll also hear of Yes No People, because Yes No People were a band, but also the creators of Stomp. And then obviously Stomp, I was then their tour manager, their production manager. Again, we went around the world, and Stomp, as you know, it was a huge success. And I think there are 5 Stomps now touring the world.
There's still one in London, yeah.
There's still one in London, there's still one in New York. I think it's 7 or 8 years now.
Are you still involved in that at all? Or?
No, I'm not, because again, trying to get me into how I started in comedy, during this time and touring, of course, I started meeting a lot of people who were beginning their careers in comedy. And so I decided after about 3 or 4 years with Stomp, it was time to do something different. And I heard that this chap called Eddie Izzard was looking for a tour manager, and so I went for an interview for the job. And when he realised I was the guy who used to work with Pookie Snackenberger, he thought, well, if I'm good enough for them, I'm good enough for him, and Stomp, etc. He knew about Luke and Steve from Stomp. So He gave me the job, and I ended up doing a tour which was called One Word Improv, which is that poster that you see over there. And that was the first ever tour I did. And then from that tour, he asked me if I wanted to be his permanent tour manager. So basically, I ended up touring the world with him. In between times, I'd also started tour managing Dylan Moran, Tommy Tiernan, Ardal O'Hanlon. So I had a tour management thing going. I was basically the van driver. You know, the guy did the lights, the guy did the sound, the guy set it all up. And so after 3 or 4 years working with Eddie on all the tours as his tour manager, we were on a plane going to Melbourne, I think it was, and he literally handed me across his computer, and it was an email on it, and he said, read the email. And I read it, and it said something like, Dear Eddie, I just want you to be the first to know it's been great being your promoter, but I've been offered this fantastic new job and I'm going to take it, so therefore I can no longer be your promoter. And I said, wow, what are you going to do, Ed? And he said, well, you've always been talking about wanting to be a promoter. He said, you're my promoter now, if you want to be. And I said, yeah, that's fantastic. And then he paused, and then he said, you know, I want my next tour to be an arena tour. And of course, an arena tour for a comic had never been done before. So in one breath, I'd been offered the job to be a promoter, but also given this massive task of trying to do a tour for a comic in an arena. And I had to go away and think about that. And eventually I formed a company, and by hook and by crook, I raised the money to do that first arena tour, which was incredibly successful. So I kind of set myself up in business because of that. And then the acts that I was looking after, Tommy and Dylan and Ardal, they came over to me as a promoter. So I ended up, within 6 months having 5 or 6 really top acts. So that's how I got set up.
And at this point, were they with management?
All with management, yeah, absolutely.
But they were able to just come to you? Like, did their management not get a say in?
Yeah, no, they did. I mean, the first thing I did when I got home off the plane was to ring Chiggy, who is Eddie's manager, and say to her, "Listen, I know this sounds crazy, but Eddie's just offered me the job as his promoter," and I said, "And he wants to do this arena tour," and she just went, "Great." So you know, yeah, wonderful. Yeah, she's a wonderful woman.
Yeah,
and oh really?
Yeah.
No, she's fantastic. And I just said, yeah. I said, this is great, and she said, I think she said something to me. How are you going to raise the money? And I said, I really don't know yet, Chiggy, but I'm going to do it. And I think within about 2 weeks, I formed a company. I'm working from my bedroom. I was calling around venues. In fact, I literally rang Wembley Arena, and the first thing they said to me is, "He's a comic, isn't he?" So it was one of those times really that it was pretty crazy. I even got double booked somewhere because they didn't take me seriously. Chiggy was amazing. She just accepted it, and Chiggy at the time, well, no, still does at the time, looks after Dylan. And Tommy now. So it was quite easy to sort of take on those guys. So yeah, the whole thing was very, very quick and easy. But obviously, if the tour hadn't have worked for Eddie, that would have been the end of my career.
Yeah, thankfully he's very good.
Yeah, he was very good, and because I've been working with him for so long, I knew the numbers that he was selling to. So I thought, well, if we play 5 nights in Sheffield and we're playing to 1,500 a night, surely we can do 1 night in an arena. So it was knowledge based as well as really wanting to do it. And Eddie always pushes the boundaries, and so you kind of got to be there for him and with him. So it was a challenge, and we'd already done some huge places. We played Docklands Arena, which I think we played a half arena to test out. We did Glorious there, and it worked out. It was a big success, and the question was, would people come to this huge,
Well, that's the interesting thing for me. I mean, my favourite comedian is Louis C.K. And or one of them, and he recently just put up a thing saying, his tour stuff's gone on sale, and he's doing the Wembley Arena.
Oh yeah.
And I'm not going because I'm worried it's not going to be as good as the last time I saw him because
Where
of
did
the
you
size.
see him last time?
I saw him at the Hammersmith Apollo, and I was standing on the left-hand side, so I stood for about 2 hours watching him. But I don't think the experience is going to be there with the size of the venue. I mean, did you have resistance with? Because I mean, if audiences aren't used to that kind of venue for that sort of performance, I mean, Eddie, he's very animated, and I've seen sort of recordings of I can't remember the recording venue, but he had like a stage that went round part of the audience and stuff.
Yeah.
So he made the venue his own, not just the stage.
Yeah, we thought very hard about the production, and we spent an awful lot of money. But what we were worried about more than anything else about the production was sound. When you're playing in Wembley Arena's 10,500 seats, so you have to use delay systems. So the people at the back are hearing the sound, milliseconds later than the people in the front. So you have to be aware of that. You have to be aware of that from an audience perspective, but more so from a performance perspective, because the laugh is also delayed. So you may say something, and then as you're moving on to the next piece, they're laughing at the thing you've just said, and you hear that coming back. So it can really throw you. So we practiced a lot with that, and also we used very I can't remember if we had them at the time, but we used the highest definition screens that we could get, and made sure that even the person sitting in the upper seats in the corner could see and hear everything that was going on. In fact, there were great seats up there. You could literally see it, but you'd be watching a screen. And we also made the decision that we wouldn't do it like TV. We wanted to keep it as live as possible, so we followed the act. We followed Eddie. If he went, left, we panned left. If he went right, we panned right. So we followed his actions. We didn't try and cut it at all, and it worked. I mean, we were pretty nervous about it, but once we did the first night and got the first night out the way, and we realised technically it all worked. I mean, so many things could go wrong,
So
we realised we had something.
So as a performer, you have to say stuff slower or pause for longer?
I think you do have to slow down a tad, yeah, and you have to wait for those applause to come through, because otherwise you'll be drowning out what's coming next. It's listen, you're talking about milliseconds here, but you can't, and obviously the bigger the room gets. We used a great sound designer, a guy called George Glossop, who I think was the first guy to put a radio mic or a capsule mic on Kate Bush. And of course, we were the first again to use these headset capsule mics, these tiny little mics. And Eddie didn't like it in his face, so it was almost hidden down his cheek somewhere. So the distance of sound playing in the 10,500 seats. So we had a number of issues. And the last tour we've just done, and each tour, of course, since we've played arenas, but the last tour we've used Twitter feeds, etc., as part of the opening, so the audience can tweet, and it's up there on the screens instantly. And then we open it up, and you can see from all over the world tweets coming in. Hey, blah blah, from New York, or South Africa. So it's a fun thing to do.
Yeah, definitely, and it's community building as well around the act, because
Yeah.
if they've done like 5 dates in Leicester and now they're doing 2 dates in London, and all of a sudden they can see tweets from the fans up there.
Exactly, you're in for a great night, guys. Or I saw it 2 months ago, or I'm going to see it in 3 months, and especially when it's a world tour like Eddie's is.
Yeah.
Well, Eddie's, I think it's 27 countries, and so you can see all the tweets coming in from all over the world, and it's and it's great. Different people saying different things, or someone tagging someone else, or it's it kind of makes sense to have that, the thing about, does it work in a big space? I think if you produce something for a big space, it works. But I've seen stuff which really shouldn't have been in such a huge space. I mean, there's no need for it, other than well, they can, I guess. I mean, personally, I'd rather see something in a 150 seater, but the likes of Eddie or Dylan or Michael McIntyre or whatever. I mean, it's not going to happen, is it?
Yeah, they'd sell out 200 dates as 150 and still have room for doing lates and early shows for that sort of thing.
Yes, I mean, there's just not enough years in their life, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I remember a quote. I really like your quote from when we did the live pod, where you said something like, "Is the venue as big as their ego?" or something like that, where you were discussing whether someone should even do a venue of that size.
Yeah. Well, it is also obviously about ego. I mean, I suppose once you know you can do it, it's not really about ego, but not knowing if you can do it. You know, it's a fantastic place to be, really. It's a really scary place to be. But, you know, I mean, you kind of know, as I say, if you develop a show which is right for an arena, then there's only one place it can go it is an arena, and then it's, well, can it sell? I mean, at the moment, I'm producing Gary Tank Commander, Greg McHugh, in the Hydro in Glasgow, which is 10,500 seats. Now, most people say, well, Gary Tank Commander, but, you know, we're doing 3 nights in there, and, you know, and it looks like it's going to sell out. So it's a fantastic position to be in, because we can now do the show, Gary Tank Commander, as it should be done, with the full cast and, you know, whatever special effects we want. It's going to look absolutely amazing. So, you know, that was us not knowing if we could sell the tickets, but really, really wanting to put on a big production, because if we'd have half done it, we'd have ended up in a, you know, 1,000-seat venue or whatever, and not been able to do what we really wanted to do, and possibly not been able to afford to bring in the cast and all the rest of it. But this way was the way to do it. So, you know, we take a huge chance, a huge leap of faith, and it seems to be working out.
It sounds like, so I would have thought that audiences, especially comedy savvy audiences, would have been resistant to going to a venue of the size of the O2. Whereas it sounds like it was more maybe the booker at the O2 that had the most resistance, because you said, you know, you ring them up and they go, but he's a comic, because if they've never done it before.
No, they've never done it before, exactly.
Yeah, and if you're an audience member, it might be exciting, because you're like, oh, we'll go to the first ever comedy arena tour.
Yeah.
That's actually a selling point. Whereas for the booker, they're thinking, yeah, but are you going to get enough people in?
Well, the only time it was ever done prior to that was Newman and Baddiel. And I don't know if it was all of Wembley Arena that they played in, or a half arena, but they, you know, it wasn't a tour as such. It was a one-off event. So and that was several years before, and so no one had tried to do it since. And you know, it's. I mean, I was tour managing Lee Evans at the time I was doing that show. I was producing the show for Eddie and tour managing Lee. And I remember telling him one night that this is what we were doing, and he said, "Wow, that's amazing! Wow, imagine that." And then, like 2 years later, Lee's like doing 6 nights or whatever. So, you know, it was relatively easy, really. And I suppose the change came because the technology grew sufficiently to allow us to be able to do a show like that and know it would work. Prior to that, I think it was more difficult with sound and certainly screens. They used to have these huge screens called jumbotrons, and they weighed a ton, and they come in like 4 trucks or whatever. So things miniaturized to some extent.
When you said technology, I thought you meant as in people being able to buy tickets easier, like on their phone. Or
oh no, not at all.
That not have an impact, or
no. I think I'd only just got a mobile phone when we did that tour.
Okay.
So no, it just, as I say, what you're really scared about is that the audience don't have a good time.
Okay, and I mean, like I said, I've just sort of sorted out a tour for myself, and in terms of, I mean, it's nowhere near that level, obviously, but it's one of those things where
you surprised me, Simon.
I know, so I'm ambitious, but it's one of those things where I've found out. I mean, I've been learning about splits and renting the theatre versus door splits and all that kind of stuff, and I've sort of slowly learning that there's sort of different levels in terms of audience capacity to circuits, if that makes sense. I mean, I don't know if you think of it like that. So going around like a fringe festival like this, you'd just pick a venue based on whether you want to do free or paid first, but then you'd go with room size, and then outside of that, I'm looking at sort of theatre sizes, and then you'd go to arena sizes. I mean, do you think of it like that, or do you think of the show production? I mean, because how much involvement are you? Put it this way: if Eddie came to you tomorrow and said, "I've got this arenas show," how would he? I mean, he would know now, but originally, how would he have known that would be good in that? Because you can't practice that. There's no open mic nights for arenas to learn if the show is.
I think that you have to decide whether or not you can sell it in the first place, because I mean, you can't just take on Wembley Arena, I mean, it's going to cost you tens of thousands of pounds just for the hire, let alone the several trucks of gear coming in. So you have to know that you can sell it, otherwise it doesn't make sense. I mean, unless you do more than 50% in an arena, you're going to lose money. So if you can't fill it, don't do it. So that's the simple criteria. But I mean, when I first started working with comics and working with theatre companies, there'd be the club circuit, and then there'd be the art centre circuit, which many theatre companies would just do continuously. And so you would hope that in terms of a stand-up comic that they'd eventually, maybe 4 or 5 years on the club circuit, they'd eventually get some TV, maybe some radio. They'd be able to elevate to an art centre, maybe 300 max, and then from that you get onto the small scale theatres, and then you get onto the larger scale theatres, and now eventually you get onto arenas. Now, because of TV, a lot of people have been able to miss out on that whole middle section. They've gone to clubs and they've gone to TV, and in some cases they've gone straight to, or it seems virtually straight to, arenas with maybe a few major theatres in between. So it used to take years, it used to take several years, and now it can be done very quickly through TV, although I think that that's probably not the case right now, but it certainly was 2 or 3 years ago, when you do a few sessions on Live at the Apollo and suddenly you'd be elevated to an arena playing comic, which is, it's fantastic if you can do it, but most comics can't. So it is that hard slog of clubs, smaller dates, and building up your audience as well as, your live audience as well as your media audience, your TV, your radio audience. If you can pull those two things together, then you can be playing big venues within 4 or 5 years, but you need to be out there doing it all the time.
In terms of the I don't want to call it a shortcut, but the TV shortcut, as it were, when you just get you get an appearance on the Apollo or something like that, and all of a sudden you have a much bigger reach into a much bigger fan base. I mean, do you think that still is the case? Because the amount of comedy that's on TV now, you think it would get saturated and not be as effective?
I don't think it is the case anymore. I mean, it still helps, but as you say, you use the word, it is, saturated is the word. I mean, it's a shame really, because you see so many good comics who don't have that profile, whether it's because the management they have or whatever, they just don't get that profile, so they get missed. And there's a great kind of reluctance amongst the public to go and see stuff which they've never seen on TV or heard on radio, and that is a great shame, because some of the best stuff is stuff that you've never seen on TV or on radio, because of course it's unedited, and once it's edited it becomes quite bland. So for me, TV, radio sell tickets. I'm never going to deny that. But anybody who's ever listened to anything I've ever said or written will know that I'm not a great fan of TV, particularly because I think it just does, it soaks up the best of their writing and then misses some of the best comics that we have. So it sells tickets, but other than that, I really don't care for it very much.
No, that's fair enough. I mean, when I spoke to Ian Coyle about this, he said that he's the commissioner for Dave. He was saying that he's not really a commissioner, he's more of an ad man, because he can't commission half the stuff he wants to because it won't get advertising on it. No. And obviously it needs to. And when you think of it like that, you think all we've got left is sort of the BBC that don't have to appeal to that kind of thing, but they've got a lot of other stakeholders they've got to appeal to. And then, like you said, it misses out a chunk of people that maybe just wouldn't work on TV, but the reason it wouldn't work on TV is because it's a live thing and it's amazing live.
I think one of the things that really frustrates me is that because there are so many good comics out there that aren't picked up by TV and radio, and as I say, maybe the reason they're not picked up by TV and radio is because they haven't got the sort of management who are connected with TV and radio or would push them. I feel that whether the BBC or the ITV or Sky or whoever it is, there aren't enough people from those areas going out there to the clubs, finding acts themselves. They seem more reliant on going to the players already, so the management already who control those acts and saying, who have you got? rather than this is somebody I've found. You know what I mean? It's like if you had somebody or people who were incredibly passionate about comedy out there seeing what's happening now, what's out there in the clubs, and then maybe doing the first circuit shows, I think you might have a different kind of comedy genre, TV wise.
But do you think the reason why they're not doing that? Well, first of all, they're probably worried about losing their jobs and not taking a risk because it might backfire and go wrong.
Yeah.
So there's a logical marketing based and self-interest based reason why they might not do that. But also, it might just be that those people, like we said, are live acts rather than pre-recorded and edited acts. So even if they find them and go, this person's great, then they're still not going to put them on because it just won't translate.
Maybe that's the case, but sometimes they suddenly discover somebody who's been on the circuit for donkey's years, and then they're on every channel, seemingly every hour of the day. It's kind of saturation time. So why aren't they out there finding those same people earlier on, or more people? Because if they can find one, and then everybody goes, "Oh, this is the guy, or this is the gal, this is the person I'm gonna," why aren't they out there already finding those people? If they're looking for different, my God, there's lots of different out there. If they're looking for the same, I think any of us can find that. I mean, listen, it's difficult, especially as this is being recorded, for me to say really what I think, but it is a great frustration because, I know there are some great people out there who never have a chance and never get a chance, and I would like to, maybe there should be a special program to give those people the chance, Maybe that's what the BBC should do if they're being told that they're not diverse enough, rather than getting the big celebs, the ones who are going to have 2 million people watch. Maybe they should find comics that actually there's only going to be a couple of 100,000 people watch, or 100,000 people, or 100 people watch, but it's different and new, and maybe they'll create their own live comedy.
When I spoke to Anne Edivin, who's the head of the BBC Writers' Room, she said that the push for diversity at the moment is, I'm paraphrasing massively, but it's towards like sort of ethnicities and different niches in comedy in itself, because at the moment there's not enough content coming from those, and they need to be seen to cover a wider range of examples of different writers and different performers, which I totally get and I totally support. I don't like the mandating of it. I don't necessarily feel that's a logical way of dealing with it, because it highlights it more and it makes it seem like you're doing it because you have to, because you're being forced to, rather than that you want to. You know what I mean? But I know what you mean. I just don't. I think Stuart Lee's comedy vehicle was an attempt at what you've just suggested, where he was going to say that he's just going to pick the people he likes regardless of management.
Well, that's just been killed off, hasn't it?
Yeah. But was it? What was the?
I just read the other day that they weren't doing another series.
He's not doing comedy vehicle. It was the alternative comedy experience. I mean.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
He was doing that, where he was bringing on people that he just liked, regardless of management, which I like the idea of. But again, a lot of them were very established and had their own fan base, and it wasn't. I mean, I'm not saying grab people from obscurity, because again, like you said at the start, if you just grab someone from obscurity, put them on TV out of nowhere, then where do they go from there? Because they can't just immediately do a arena tour because they're not ready for it.
No. It's hard to say. There's many ways of looking at it. I agree that diversity and ethnicity are important factors, and there are some bloody good people out there. Sorry, I just cut on that. I've got to think about how I approach that. It's a really good question, because anything that you say may come across as being almost anti that, which I'm not. But does that mean that if you're white, middle class, but very, very good, you're still going to be missed, because you're still not ticking the boxes that are being asked of you?
As someone who's on, I would say I'm white and middle class, and as someone on the circuit, both touring and club at the moment, I would say that you can be, because there are friends of mine who are great, who are fit into that middle ground, who are not doing as well as I think they should be. But that's my biased opinion on a friend, so obviously I'm even more biased than I would be about just a talented person. But I think anyone can be missed, but I think you just need to like be aware of the business element. Mm-hmm. And the more aware, and the more, this is partly what this is about, the more you ask questions, the more you can try and fit the boxes that they're asking for. Because so for example, if you want to make a TV show for like BBC, you just need to know that you need to write 28 pages, about a minute a page, you know, for the sitcom, because their half hours are 28 minutes, and they need a certain, you know, and then know what channel you're writing for example. If you just want to write a sitcom that doesn't fit a tone of voice for that channel, put it on the internet. You can still do that. Yeah. So I think at the moment we're at a very interesting stage where you can find out what people want, and if you tick the boxes, then that's great. But I think if you make the boxes impossible for people to tick, that's when it starts to become a non-level playing field that it should be when it comes to talent-based arts.
Well, observational comedy, for instance, has been around for an awful long time now. And I think more and more people are looking for new perspective on observational comedy. You know, one of the things I've done in the last year is formed a management company, but not for UK-based acts, but for overseas acts, and particularly acts performing in a second language.
Interesting, okay.
And yeah, it is interesting, and one of the main reasons it's interesting is because, of course, they come with a whole new set of, not rules, but comedy rules, if you like. And sometimes they're completely unacceptable. You know, sometimes I've been through scripts with, you know, whether it be a Russian or a German, who saying, you can't say that here. You can't do that here. And yet, as far as they're concerned, we accuse their countries of being you know, censored, and they're saying, but you say we're censored in Russia or whatever, but we can't say this. You're censoring every other line I'm saying, but for different reasons.
Have you got an example of that? Because I'd like to know, like, where...
I could give you plenty of examples, but not here now. But,
sorry. Okay, yeah.
You know, we get presented with stuff, and we say, I'm sorry, but you can't say that.
Okay.
It's quite simple. And now that could be because it comes across... And it's not saying that they are racist or sexist. It's just that what they say, you know, is maybe something that we would have said, you know, back in the early 80s or mid-70s.
Okay, I get what you mean.
But we can't say that now.
Right.
Because we don't think like that now. But they do think like that now. So... for them, it's, well, what's wrong with this? You know, I've got no problem with gay people or with black people or whatever. Why can't I say this? Just can't say it, okay?
Yeah, okay.
If you say that, you'll get slammed. You'll just, you know, all the reviews will be negative, so please don't say that. Maybe say this instead, or come. So we are trying to educate people who have only just discovered in the last couple of years stand-up comedy, when we've had, you know, a quarter of a century or more doing stand-up comedy. So but what's interesting about what they do is their perspective, you know, from where they come from. And, you know, we have signed South African comics, French, Italian, Dutch, Swiss. You know, it's a very, very interesting group of people, and all of them completely different. So for me now, it's really wonderful hearing what they have to say about the... Yeah. Well, that's why I said about character, because if you do it in character, I think that's fine.
Okay.
Really, because you know, we've all seen left-wing people play right-wing characters, and it's fine because you know they're literally just taking the piss out of them.
Yeah.
Not that the right-wing people seem to realise that, but but yeah, no. Even with what I would say left wing, and probably 99.9% of all the people I know and work with are left wing bias. Even they come out with what you would think of as being right wing stuff. So that's what you have to watch, because you don't want people to think that.
No.
As I say, unless it's a character, and it's very much down that line of character. So, yeah.
Yeah, like Al Murray, for example.
Like Al Murray, for example.
Very obviously a character. I mean, I interviewed Copstick for
But very obviously left-wing too.
Yeah, but I'm saying that the stuff he says, you can, it just from even the minute he comes out on stage, you can tell it's so over the top that it's...
But he has a whole posse of right-wingers following him.
Yeah,
who just don't get the character.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or maybe they do get the character, but they want to support it.
Maybe.
Pretty weird.
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, you can't eliminate that from your audience when you do something like that.
No, you can't. No, your audience choose you. You don't choose them.
Interesting. Yeah, no, that's true. No, I mean, when I interviewed Copstick for this, interestingly, she came out in defence of Dapper Loves?
Yeah. Did she come out?
Yeah, she said it's a character, so it doesn't make sense why everyone was jumping on him, because as a character, you should get, not indemnity to say whatever you want, but you get more scope to say things, is, again, massively paraphrasing what she said. But, I mean, and again, it comes down to personal taste, whether you like what he says and what he does. But again, it's one of those interesting dynamics of...
Can the word character just not be an excuse to do that kind of stuff, though?
It can be. And I remember when... Because I had him on Facebook before this all happened, and he booked me for his night a while ago before I'd seen him gig, and I had him on Twitter, and I remember a while ago he got tweeted and asked if he was a character, and someone said, he replied, not really, and this was like 5 years ago, and I remember that because I remember after seeing him thinking, I wonder if that is what he does. Right. But then obviously everything came out, and he said it is a character. Now, whether that is a defence or whether that's him, changing what he was doing in his own mind, and now it is a character.
Well, as long as he knows what a character is, it's a character. I fear he may not know what a character is.
Well, no. I mean, it could become a character. Like it's got all the elements. If you wrote down sort of how a character would or the sort of criteria of what you would need to have a comic character, it could become that. But personally, at the moment, I don't feel like it is. That was why I found it interesting that she sort of felt like if he says it is, so maybe don't jump on him. But I suppose that's not what you want.
Well, she'd have to believe that he is a character too.
Yeah.
I mean, look, you can watch any act, and you know pretty quickly if it's a character or not.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't comment.
That's fine. No, I mean, I was only bringing that up because I thought it's obviously not what you want to happen to any of your acts, who might get not mistaken for.
No, if what they were developing was a character, if it was character comedy, and then they came out and says, look, I used to, back in the day, Pukas Nakamid, I used to work with a guy, and he used to do, and he was a very left wing guy, and he used to do a character which was a South African policeman. Right, and this is in apartheid era, and he used to dress up as a South African policeman, and his opening line was something like, "Why give the Blacks the vote? They don't eat it." Right, yeah. And that was how he did his whole act. Now, half the audience, or more than half the audience, didn't know that he was doing character.
Right.
Okay, and he was getting stuff thrown at him, getting spat at. It was incredible, and yet this guy was somebody who was, as left as you could imagine, but doing a great, and he almost did it too well. He was too good at it. The accent was too good, the act was too full on, and it really hit. I mean, lines like that, but just all the time. And he literally had to run for his life sometimes. Of course, he didn't do the character for very long. He had to keep it up. But that's a point in question. So if I had somebody who came over here, I mean, what if my Russian guy was incredibly, left wing, but he had this incredibly right wing character? Would I want to put him on stage? Yeah, if it's funny, and he was really, really good at the character. But he'd have to be really tough and he'd have to be strong and be able to tough it out, and he'd have to prove to the reviewers and the intellectual elite, if you like, that it was a character and what he was saying was valid, as well as being funny.
Yeah, and I suppose in some ways you'll also make sure he doesn't go to certain chains and clubs, because regardless of how good he is, certain audiences are never going to want to go with something like that.
No, they're probably not. It's a tough one, isn't it? Because, you know, again, I came up in an age where you could really say anything you wanted to say, as long as it wasn't racist or sexist. I mean, that was the big changeover which we all breathed a sigh of relief in, you know. And suddenly you had this, you know, these wonderful stand-ups coming and talking the politics really you wanted to hear. I mean, you know, it'll sound crass now, but you know, when people like Ben Elton came along, it was just a breath of fresh air listening to him and talking about Thatcherism and slamming this, that, and the other. I mean, it was wonderful stuff. And Alexei Sayle, fantastic stand-up comics, and that got rid of the old. And the old were, you know, racist, sexist, mother-in-law jokes. It was awful, and I fear in a way that some of the characters coming back in are the old style comics through the back door.
As in, they're doing the racist, sexist, mother-in-law jokes
As character.
As in
as a pretense of character, yeah.
Oh, as a pretense, so not really a character. I thought you meant as in they're satirising the people from 30 years ago that were doing it without any form of irony.
Both.
Okay, interesting. I hadn't looked at it like that. But then I suppose I didn't live through that and now seen the cycle, if that makes sense.
Yes. I mean, I can see the recycle I can see the recycling, and I don't like it. It bothers me that it's going backwards. It should be elevating, and it's actually going down.
You mean as in
it's just too easy? I mean, what? Sorry?
The circuit in general, or as in?
No, I mean that kind of comedy.
Oh, okay.
Is what's being touted almost.
Are you talking about like TV or circuit or?
I think because TV and radio require very quick writing and rapid turnover, then the material can be almost derogatory. And
I don't want to say lazy, because that's not fair, but not as good as it could be if they'd spent more time on it.
Not as clever as it could be, so therefore it comes over maybe not being, but sounding incredibly crass.
Yeah, and maybe, because I mean, I spent a lot of time...
And then they have to try and defend it, which they can't.
Yeah, that always annoys me, because I'm sort of like, I get you've got bills to pay, and I get it's an opportunity, but I mean, I spend a lot of time thinking about the victim in every joke I've got, because I want to either be punching upwards because it's me that's the lowest end, or I want to be the victim in the joke, if that makes sense, because I don't, especially while I'm basically unknown, I don't want, you know, you can't be an unknown comedian and all of a sudden be like, right, I'm going to be high status, because I mean, unless again it's your character, like Marcel Leconte or something. I'm sure when he was on the open circuit more, he's high status. And the character works, because, and I mean, I met him after I'd seen him for the first time. He came off and got changed. It was like night and day. And
he's a lovely guy.
Oh yeah, he's absolutely lovely. But I was not expecting that, because he played it so well that I thought, oh, he's definitely French. And it was like this sort of weird, not as in, like, I knew it wasn't, I thought he was a French guy playing that part.
A lot of people do.
I know, I didn't think it was actually who he was, but it's one of those things.
Well, he's just, he's a brilliant character comic. I mean, perfect, you know. I wonder if the French know he's not.
I don't think he's ever gigged in France, has he?
Oh, he should.
I think he should. I think that'd be, I would love a video of that. I would love to see how they would appreciate it.
No, he's very good. Nice guy.
So, your management agency?
Yeah.
Is it a diversification of your touring thing, or is it like you trying to find a new niche for management? Because it sounds like I mean, as far as I'm aware, no one else is doing specifically second language speaking comedians as a management proposition.
No, they're not. I mean, people are managing overseas acts, no, that's. Is it a niche? I suppose it's because I've met so many. I mean, look, the reason that the whole thing started up is twofold. First of all, because, you know, I toured the world for 25 years, wherever. You know, been to all the comedy festivals, met some fantastic comics who have supported acts I've been on tour with or I've met at festivals, all wanting to come into Edinburgh or into the UK and not being able to find a way to do that, not understanding how it works, etc., etc. So I almost got sick of explaining how Edinburgh works and who they need to speak to. And then the second point is, again, meeting certain people and then as a promoter inviting them over and wanting to make sure that if I'm going to put all that time and effort into bringing them over, then really we should have some sort of relationship after that, rather than just relying on loyalty, which is essentially what I do, because I don't do contracts as such for promotion. So for instance, it was me who invited Trevor Noah into Edinburgh, and I'd met Trevor, well, then when we met Nelson Mandela. So it was at the same time we did that I ran into Trevor, and he was talking, and people said to me, this guy's a really good comic, and I'd been introduced to him by Eddie through email, because when Eddie was looking for a promoter in South Africa, he said, I met this guy once at the Comedy Store, what's his name, Trevor, and he gave me his number. So my conversation started with him. So as I say, I met him, said to him again, you should come in. 2 or 3 years went by. The next thing, I get a call from an American agent saying that Trevor wanted to come to Edinburgh and would I take him, and I did. So, if I was going to do all of that and spend all of that time and also all of that money to bring someone over and put them in, I'd want a little bit more out of it. I'd want some sort of longevity. I did the same with Bo Burnham. I thought, well, the easiest way to do that then is to, and I also at the same time, I had German guy wants to come in, Russian guy wants to come in, French guy, and I thought, well, if I'm going to do this, why don't I just form something which is a little bit more secure for them and for me. And so I decided to form an agency, and I brought in Natalie to help me work on that, and she's been fantastic, and she's signed, I think we've signed 13 acts now, 13 or 14 acts, and we promote them and manage them everywhere outside of their own country.
Oh, wow. So do they have management in their own country then?
They have management in their own country, and they do their own dates, etc. But anywhere outside of there, we look after. So as I say, Nick downstairs, he's we're working in 20 odd countries at the moment. So if we know that somebody wants to come over, and so we got Loiso Gola over here from South Africa at the moment, and he is he's just been on at Soho Theatre, and we also have over here, God, trying to keep tabs on everybody. We also have Orlando Baxter, who's going to be in Edinburgh, do his first year, and I met Orlando at Montreux Festival, so signed him. So he's American, but again, outside of America. But the point is, look, if we want to have, what we do, we're in the promotion business for the long game and not the short game. And every act I ever work with, I say, look, this might be Edinburgh, but hopefully there'll be Edinburgh's in like 7 years, or maybe you won't need Edinburgh in 7 years. But I'm not, we don't make money from Edinburgh. We lose money from Edinburgh. We are promoters in the old-fashioned sense of the word. We will take you into Edinburgh and let's see what happens. And obviously, if we work with acts from the UK who have management, then really you're relying on the management and the act to give you that loyalty back in 5 years' time when they do make it. And then there's the big tour, and okay, great, everybody will start making some money, and your time and effort will be rewarded. But there's no guarantee on that. And also the act, of course, you could take them into Edinburgh for 3 years, and then they leave the management that they're in, go somewhere else who do their own promotion. So again, it's gone. So I thought, well, okay, we've managed so long with what we do, and we're doing incredibly well, and we've got fantastic acts, and they're incredibly loyal. But what if we're bringing acts from overseas, and we have to go through that again, not knowing how it works over there with Germany, South Africa, France? So we decided the best way was to set up a management agency, and that way we have that continuation, we have that involvement from day one. We bring you into Edinburgh, let's see what happens, but what if you run away with a newcomer prize or the main prize? Suddenly going to be elevated. Runs at the Soho Theatre, maybe TV, radio, maybe tours only a year or two away. So we wanted to be part of that, and also all the other sides of being a management as well. Because when people see, you can get a commercial out of it. You could be a writer as well. You could write film or book. So we wanted to be, all of that. So all that is what's the word I'm looking for? Everything. What's the word I'm looking for, Simon?
Encompassing?
Yes, we wanted to be all encompassing.
Okay.
And so each and every one of the acts that we've signed so far, that's been the agreement. And we're starting to make inroads, which is really exciting. And it's exciting seeing them coming through as well. But more than that, it gives them a fantastic opportunity to go to Edinburgh without any financial worries. We just bring them in and say, you do your show, we'll sort everything else, and let's see what we get out of it. Because obviously these guys who've been doing comedy maybe for 6 or 7 years have been dreaming about playing somewhere like Edinburgh and still not knowing how it works. So it's exciting for all of us.
That's really interesting. So as their management, I don't want to say it like this, but for want of a better phrase, cop the bill for them to come over, stay in Edinburgh, do the show, then and pay for the flyers and all that kind of stuff, I presume. They go and do the show, and then at the end of it you have a contractual agreement that they'll tour based around where you're going to send them because of your own connections, or if they do well, hopefully they will do well, but if they do well, then they get a run at the Soho, which I presume the Soho will keep one slot free for whoever wins a newcomer award or stuff like that. Only makes perfect sense from there. Yeah. So if stuff like that comes up, you'll deal with that and then get a commission off of that. But does it work as in then? So do you get a higher cut of things for the next 3 months to kind of pay back Edinburgh, and then it goes back down to a normal commission fee, or?
No, it's a bit more complicated than that. Look, forget the management side for a second, but as promoters, we take people into Edinburgh and lose money. We don't charge a fee for Edinburgh. We only charge for the people who were there, i.e. for the work, for the flyers, etc., for the street team manager, for the people that look after the act. That's all we charge for. We have quite a hefty Edinburgh bill at the end of each year. And as I say, because we're independent promoters, we are there bringing acts in, and hopefully, there's an unwritten loyalty clause saying, look, if we're going to do all of this for nothing, and we're going to look after your acts as well as we can, then hopefully we will continue that relationship for the rest of their career. So that's how we work. For the management side, obviously, we are doing exactly the same thing, except we don't have to worry about the loyalty clause. Right. The loyalty clause is integral.
Because they've already signed a contract.
Because they signed a contract with us. As management, you have to have a contract as management. The
most interesting thing for me in interviewing people like yourself or PRs or anyone involved in the quote-unquote industry side of it is no one seems to make a profit on Edinburgh. Literally, you said,
if you owned a flat in Edinburgh, you'd make a profit.
Yeah, they make a bundle. But it seems like, unless you own a venue or a flat, everyone seems to make a giant loss. Is there a reason why Edinburgh has become the festival out of all of them that is the place to get spotted?
It's the biggest comedy festival in the world. Full stop. It's the best, the biggest.
But surely that self-perpetuates, so because it wasn't always that, so it had to have grown to that.
It's always been expensive. Okay. I don't think anyone's ever made any money in Edinburgh. You can make money in Edinburgh, but I would suggest you can't make money in Edinburgh if you're going to do it properly in a venue of less than 125, 130, and you could probably break even or maybe make a little bit of money. Look, you've got your PR. You've got your flyer, you've got your accommodation, you've got to pay the Fringe. everybody wants to take your money, basically, even for the ticket printing, the commission on the sales. Then there's the PRS. It goes on. There's very little left. So when I bring acts into Edinburgh for the first time, they're playing 55 seats. Well, the break even on 55 seats, I think on paper, is about 175%. And that's not including the accommodation and travel. So, you can work it out yourself. I'd say the average to do it properly in Edinburgh is, £8,000 to £10,000 per act on average. So how are you going to make that money when you're paying £5, £6, £7 tickets in a 55-seat venue over 23 or 26 nights? It's impossible.
You've got to have a bigger game plan.
Yeah. So the idea is that, look, we can do it, we can't do it every year for the same act in a 55-seater. That would be different. I'm sorry, that would be ridiculous. But we can bring them in for the first time because that's their greatest opportunity. So what you're hoping is that they've got, really the best show that they could have at that stage, and bring them in for their first hour, because that's what you want. You really want your best hour. There's no point if you haven't got your best hour. Wait until you've got your best hour. I mean, for instance, Orlando came into Edinburgh last year on our advice and just did like 35 minutes tryouts on the Free Fringe. And Will came and watched and chatted, and he's back over here again doing some tryouts. He's doing 10 minutes or half an hour, or doing his whole hour some places. And, he's got a great show. He's getting the show together, and we could sit there and advise on what works, what doesn't, where he should look at. But this is the best opportunity he's ever going to get. And he knows it. And, fingers crossed for him, because he's a fantastic act. So that makes sense from a management point of view more than a promoter point of view. But I would and have done the same as a promoter.
Okay. And do you scout for shows at the moment, or are you just dealing with your own acts and the roster of quite established names that you've always dealt with?
Scout for overseas acts, yes.
Okay. How does that process work for you?
We will hear about somebody and we'll go to a club and see.
As in like overseas in there, or when they're over here? Or?
Well, it depends if they're doing the show in English or not.
Right.
Obviously, if they're doing the show in English, we want them to do the show in English, and my Swedish isn't very good, so or my Russian or French or anything else. So yeah, we will go to a club here and see. I'm trying to think of somebody. Sometimes the comedy competitions are a good place to see, particularly overseas people. Luca, who won So You Think You're Funny.
Yeah, I know him, yeah.
You know him? Well, we've signed Luca.
Oh, have you?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah. We've been, for some, like somehow randomly you don't gig with someone for ages, and out of nowhere you're on the same bill for like 9 years. I've just been gigging with him for like the last 2 or 3 weeks, just randomly.
Nice guy, isn't he?
Oh, he's lovely. Yeah.
Yeah, he's very talented.
Yeah, he was trying some new stuff out at Piccadilly Comedy Club, where I was last Saturday. Yeah, it's good.
I think we might have.
Did you do that booking?
Oh, I think so.
I literally saw you going.
Track.
I might have put,
Yeah, no, because he was on with Loisa Gola here in Brighton a couple of weeks ago, which I went along to. So I saw his full hour,
right,
as well as Loisa's. So that's how it works. I mean, it could be a club, or we might be invited to go and see someone, or just might hear about someone. And there's people out there that we're talking to at the moment, and hopefully we will sign them too. And I don't know how many we will eventually end up with. As I say, we have around 13 or 14. But because they're overseas as well, it's a lot harder. And obviously I'm praying that we stay within Europe, because it's a nightmare already. You can imagine how difficult it's going to be to bring in people if we leave the European Union.
Yeah, I can imagine that.
I mean, we've got mega visa issues and stuff with our Russian and South African, always very difficult, and they will remain so. But my God, if it was the same with French and Italian and German, it would just be a nightmare. So
yeah, it's something I don't even think about. I don't gig abroad, so it's not
right.
Something. But also, I remember when Edinburgh was trying to get independence, I sort of posted on Facebook saying, will that make a difference to Edinburgh? Because I didn't follow it properly until I thought to myself, how will that affect me?
I don't know if it will actually, because festivals are always different, aren't they? They have more of a sort of open door policy where there's a sort of visa waiver like they have in Canada. But you know, I'm obviously always been very supportive of the European Union anyway, and a big supporter of the Labour Party. But at the moment, we've got Eddie doing a series of 333 gigs. Have you heard about those?
He's just did, I remember he did 5 or 10 marathons or something, and then I got told he was going straight on tour afterwards.
Yeah, well, so it's, I think we've booked 16 dates around the country, which is in support of the In campaign.
Oh, okay.
But the first show is in German, the second show is in French, and the third show is in English. But they're back to back, so 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, and 9 o'clock.
Oh, cool.
Which you know, hopefully will encourage a few people to vote to stay in.
That's really cool. Yeah. It's something different and something.
Again, it's something different. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing that he can do it or even think to do it.
I've never heard anyone else doing that. So.
No, I don't think there's anyone else man enough to do it. Frankly.
I was gonna say it takes a balls.
Yeah, I've never heard of anyone else running 27 marathons in 27 days either. But there you go.
Yeah. You mentioned social media before about how like you've now got not jumbotrons but those big screens that have people tweeting in sort of messages for different people. And I mean, I want to separate this question slightly, because I haven't done that on here, but because we were talking about Edinburgh. So something I like asking reviewers is if they think their review is more powerful or less powerful than word of mouth. Or if they think it's the thing that starts word of mouth and then people go to the show and then it takes on, or if it's the other way around. You know what I mean? Because if they see enough people tweeting or talking about a show, they might go and then be like, oh, and then their review sort of pushes that. Or is it their review has pushed the social media? So which one of those do you think is more valuable at the moment in terms of Edinburgh and in terms of touring, if you split it between social media and reviews?
You could say some of it depends on the age of the audience, the type of act it is, you know, because older people tend not to be too bothered by social media, whereas younger people are more driven by social media. I mean, I got 3 kids and they know of comics that I feel I've only just met and discovered and knew, and they already know them, you know, and that always surprises me. And of course, that's through social media. So I think if you're a young up-and-coming comic, then social media is the driving force, because that will bring others in as well from the established areas. Whereas I suppose if you got a Sunday Times reviewer in, you're probably already established or on the cusp of fame, if you like.
Yeah.
Because there's been so much chat. I don't think that. I don't think it's one or the other. Of course, you've got all the YouTubers as well, which are doing well. I mean, you know, we have an act out who's selling out big places, and literally, you know, they have their own YouTube channel. So
who's that? I'm interested. What do you not want to say?
Sprinkler Glitter.
Oh my God, that's that girl. Does the? Yeah, I know who she is. Okay, right. Yeah.
And you know, we were approached and took it on, and it's phenomenally successful. Phenomenally successful. So, you know, sometimes you think you know the business, and then you realise you don't know anything.
Yeah, I think social media's been a bit of a game changer for a lot of people. But I just wondered if you don't really have a following, or you've not developed that, but people are talking about you, if that, because they can do that anyway, whether that's affecting tours or if that's helping, or if you still put, because I mean you mentioned that, like, especially in Edinburgh you get a PR in, or when you're doing a tour you get a PR to help out with promotion around the place. So I wonder what stock you whether you still do PRs out of I don't want to call it like backup for against social media, but that's the way in my head I see it, because it's a historically good way of getting press and coverage. However, I'm wondering whether social media or word of mouth from people who have seen the act or maybe made a connection with them through maybe YouTube or Twitter.
Well, social media can substitute expense to a large extent, because it's very expensive to advertise, paper advertise, incredibly expensive. And so the less you can do, or the less you need to do of that, the better, really. So if a few tweets will suffice, great. But I'm not sure. It's a bit like Live at the Apollo. It's becoming less and less effective the more and more you get.
Yeah, and I mean, I work in social media for a day job, so I personally believe that if you can properly build a connection with a group of people that like what you do, they won't just buy everything, but they'll buy into you and therefore hopefully support you.
Absolutely.
In a way that just because you've read an advert in a newspaper, you wouldn't do.
No.
Because why would you?
But again, social media therefore has been substituted, say, for the early stages of touring where you'd build an audience up from the grassroots, like you'd have 12, 15 people in the first time you went round, and the next time you'd have 35, 40, and then maybe it'd be a couple of hundred the third occasion, and then really that's what you're trying to do with social media, isn't it? You're trying to build up your audience, you bring them in, they've discovered you, they tell everybody else, they've discovered you, they tell everyone else. It's just a build-up. Whereas I think that the modern comic, we're talking about comedy here, needs all of that. They need the PR, because the PR really is the central pin, the cog that brings all this stuff in, encourages the actor to talk to their audience. I mean, sometimes trying to get the act to converse with their audience is a nightmare, and yet we know as promoters that no one can sell a ticket better than the act talking directly to their audience. That sells 1,000 tickets compared to the 10 that a promoter could sell by an advert. So I think it's all of that. You have to be aware of all the different facets of their life, their social life, what they do, what their interests are. I mean, it seems that you can now build up a career with probably just a very small but dedicated number of tweeters, if that's the right phrase. You can probably book a pretty large venue in London based on that, knowing that you will sell it out. And you may not necessarily have to have an astounding show, just have to be there to show that you really exist. Sorry, that doesn't make sense. You can get rid of all of that.
No, I understand. Well, I think I understand what you mean, but if you're going to say it in a different way, let me say
I don't know how to say it, because I know what I'm trying to think, that you can almost build up your own fame from nothing. You can put something out on YouTube. You don't know who's taking it, if anybody. I guess you get the statistics after a while, but basically you put it out there, and then people start getting back to you, and then you think, I've been doing this a while now. Oh my God, I've suddenly got 100,000 followers. Maybe they'd actually like to see me. And then you've approached someone like me, and you say, I've got this, and you go, wow, that looks good. What, 250,000 people follow you? Wow, it's fantastic. Yeah, let's try something. You book a 400-seat venue, and it sells out in a nanosecond, and you go, wow, this is incredible. And that's how it is at the moment, and that's what we're experiencing. That first of all, you've never heard of someone, and you put a ticket, you put the tickets on sale, and within an hour, they're practically all gone. How did that happen? And also, they've no idea what this person is going to do, and they probably haven't even written a show at this point. So, what's the attraction?
Well, they've made a connection with those people.
Well, why haven't they made the same connection on radio or TV?
Because that's not that. Okay, I can answer that, but it's going to probably sound quite dark and deep. I get put in the category of a millennial quite a lot. I don't necessarily. I think if you were to write down the definition of that, I don't necessarily think I fit into it. But I think age-wise, I landed in it. If that makes sense.
How old are you?
I'm 29. So I think I've landed in it by my age, but I don't. A lot of the stuff that it picks up, I don't necessarily feel I fit into. However, I feel I make connections with people through social media in a way that I can't do on radio or TV, because radio and TV is a one-way medium where you're giving me. It's a passive experience. People try to make it an interactive experience by tweeting while watching TV. It doesn't work because it kind of does, but not for everything, and it just doesn't feels for me. I hate Twitter. I mean, I've represented brands and TV shows for social media, and they're always saying we need to get ourselves trending during the program, and I'm like, but then they're not looking at the program that you've spent £200,000 putting together. They're looking at their phone. Why do you want that? And it drives me mad. But they go, yeah, but then people are talking about it and it's great. And I'm like, can we not get them to tweet about it afterward? You've spent a lot of money on this show, but it's what they want, and unfortunately I need to get paid somehow. So you sort of go along with what they want as much as you push back as hard as you can. If I suppose generationally, you're probably not in social media in the same way I am.
No.
And as a result, it's kind of hard to explain. But I can Sprinkled Glitter, for example. I'm not particularly in her audience, shall we say, although I am aware of her. I have a lot of friends who are quite big on Vine and YouTube and stuff, and I've actually got a podcast I'm working on where I'm going to be a real life troll for them and sort of get them in and sort of badger them as if I'm the online person, but because no one knows, because I'm unknown, it's kind of a silly concept. But that's how I know. I don't know her, but I know of her from
the thing as well, I have to interject here. The thing is that she's bloody talented.
Oh yeah.
I mean, she's really talented. I mean, having never done a live thing before, she's got it.
This is the thing. You as much as people criticise it and go, oh yeah, but these are just people, attention seeking whatevers. You can't build an audience without being talented.
No.
It's impossible. I mean, yes, stuff gets passed over because there's so much online, but eventually it doesn't. And I know that sounds like that whole, just keep gigging and you'll make it kind of philosophy. Online, I genuinely think that's the case because, first of all, it's not like a gig where you have to actively look at it, go down to it, make an effort to buy a ticket, be in the mood to go to, all that kind of stuff. Online, I can pick and choose when I watch something. And I can do it like on the train, or I can do it in my bed, or I can. And the thing that really gets me, I was talking to again, it's Ian Coyle about this because I had a sitcom idea, and I said that to him, and he said, "You're pitching it at me, aren't you?" And I went, "No, I want to make it for the internet." And he was like, "Oh, okay, BBC Three." Then I went, "No, I want to make it for the internet." and the reason I want to make it for the internet is because of this.
Yeah.
When you watch a clip on YouTube, you're actually nearer the screen than you've ever been.
Yeah.
You're in with that person. You feel like you're chatting to a friend, and the psychology behind it is vast. And I've read about 30 books on this because it's fascinating.
Well, it's one to one. It's immediate.
Yeah,
isn't it?
But you get a dialogue out of it as well, and also it's psychologically in the phrasing of everything. It's social. It's sharing. But you don't have that on TV. You just have a passive experience, and even. When that didn't exist, bands went on radios and did interviews or in magazines and would say, oh, we like this band, and I go, oh, I like that band, I've got a connection with them, but that connection is really weak. I have to go to the thing and enjoy their music and build that connection up slowly. Now people can watch you vlog about your tour or vlog about what it's like to do whatever and feel like they know you in a way that because it's customized to you and because it's made by you. They know that they feel like they know you even more than if they were reading an edited thing in a magazine. That's why that magazine, What the Trend, I think it was a YouTube magazine that briefly came out, did not do well because everyone was like, well, I can just go to their channel and read it. Why do I need to read it in a magazine?
They should have just called themselves Pointless, shouldn't they?
Yeah. I think that was taken by a TV programme.
I think it was, yeah.
But yeah, so that's the reason why. And also, people... There's a fundamental. It's partly because of social media, but there's a fundamental element of loneliness in the generation that I'm coming out of. That we feel like we've been promised more than we. I mean, I'm talking generally. We feel like we've been promised more than we should have been, and it's impossible for us. So we can't get on the property ladder.
No.
It's very hard to get a job for life. It's even more hard to achieve a dream. Like a career as a performer, if you want. And all these things are stuff that. In the media while we were growing up have sort of been promised to us, but economically it's changed. So as a result, we want connection, but we also want to be reserved because we don't want to trust anymore.
You know what? It's the punk generation, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's
because that's that. I mean, you've just described how I felt when I was in my 20s.
Yeah,
seeing all these bands dressed in ridiculous clothes, playing these ridiculous instruments, playing ridiculous songs, and thinking, what the fuck,
Yeah.
And then within punk started, 75, 76, and suddenly it was a whole new world. And then, of course, comedy went the same way around the same time. So I get it. I would be like you. I feel. I mean, look, as I say, I've got 3 kids. In a word, I think they're fucked. And I don't know what they can do about it, because we seem to have got ourselves in this position where we seem to look after old people now and not care about young people. I mean, it's true, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, my nan...
It's their comfort, but they're fine.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm old enough now to go into the chemist and they don't charge me for a prescription. And I say to them, what do you mean don't charge me? I want to pay. They say, no, you can't pay. Why can't I pay? It's fucking ridiculous when, someone like you, for instance, who've got very little money, have to pay. It's sorry, this is completely off the point. No, I know, but I find it really. Yeah, I'm a socialist. I find it really. What's the word? It's challenging, isn't the word at all.
Depressing.
I want to say something about swearing. It is depressing. Yeah.
It's not. It's actually bang on the point. But the thing that annoys me about it is, as much as you can look at it and go, we're fucked, in a lot of ways we're not. It's just technology has evolved quicker than we have. So, the amount of times, these friends of mine, so, I mean, we keep talking about it, but if we pick any YouTuber that's doing vaguely well, they got up off their arse and went, I want to share what I do with the world.
Yeah, because you've taken control back, you see.
But you can do that.
Yes, you can now.
But the massive difference here is the cost of technology is lowered, the cost of sharing is lowered. A distribution model that exists and everyone's got access to it, called the internet, is there. If you want a day job in an office, there are. I mean, I'm not saying everyone can just find one immediately. I know how hard that is, and I have friends who are unemployed who have been unemployed for a long time, and I wouldn't put down their job search at all. However, I do believe that there are options for that if it's not going well for you where you're doing it. You could move. You could try and take an unpaid thing temporarily. And I mean, if you're not getting paid anyway, and you have 50 quid in the bank, you could easily go to a company and say, look, can I come for 2 weeks? If you cover my travel, I've got money for sandwiches, let me do some work. I did that. When I first started out...
well, you know what I did?
Go on.
The Enterprise Allowance Scheme.
Everyone did that. So, no, genuinely. That's what Henry did. I spoke to Earl Aitken about a week ago. He did that.
I'd learned to drive, and I called myself a van driver. I can't remember the name I had, and that's how I was able to sort of start touring with bands and
But it's
that was Thatcher.
Yeah, that's the thing. Everyone says the bad
most
stuff,
hated
but that
creature.
Was,
we all detest her, but she gave us this opportunity.
Yeah,
and I think we got more money from the dole or whatever. It backed up whatever we earned, and I think you had it for a year.
Yeah, and then you had to come off it for a year, and then you
that's
could,
right.
That's
but that was it. That was the last time I signed on, and I've been signed on for about 5 years at the time.
But this is the thing. I mean, there's a learned helplessness that comes the more you're unemployed. That means that you sort of feel like it's not going to happen for you or whatever.
It's very depressing.
And I totally get that. But I had that. When I left uni, I had like 2-3 months where I wasn't employed and I wasn't doing anything.
You feel worthless, don't you?
Yeah, and immediately I remember I got up one morning and I just thought to myself, I'm gonna ring every company, like not email them because that wasn't getting me anywhere. I'm gonna ring every company and I'm gonna say to them, I will come in for free. I just want to get in the door and try stuff. And eventually one did. And I got in, and then they started paying me a very shit amount of money, like it was literally covering my travel. Yeah. And then I
probably felt guilty.
Well, probably, but I didn't care because I was in the door of an industry, and I just wanted to do something because I got a degree all of a sudden and nothing. Yeah. And then I started doing journalism at the weekend, so it meant I had no social life, but I was working social media Monday to Friday, and I was doing journalism in the weekends, and out of nowhere, all of a sudden, I've got enough that I'm able to buy a Pret sandwich at lunch rather than just making my own.
Yeah.
I didn't because I wanted to keep my money, but I could have done. But it's the point that if I said to myself I'm fucked and I just accepted that, I wouldn't have booked my own tour. I wouldn't be doing I'm doing 9 festivals this year. I wouldn't be trying to meet people like you to find out how I can improve what I'm doing. And a large group of people listening to this wouldn't be, on an almost daily basis emailing me saying, thank you for doing this because it's got me up off my arse. It's got me to do something.
Well, the thing is, look, I can't speak for everybody, but a lot of us start with nothing.
Yeah.
I started with nothing. I mean, literally, I had to raise £1 million to do Eddie's tour. I mean, I didn't have, I had a £5 in my bank account. I mean, I had no money whatsoever. So if I can do that and, make a success of it, and I'm not saying it's easy, there's a lot of, oh yeah, but you were lucky enough to, run into Eddie, etc., etc. But that came through a whole history of the band playing and Edinburgh's. I mean, my first Edinburgh was 81, I think, 82.
Yeah.
It's a long process until eventually you've been, touring for 25 years. You know people, they'll know you, they trust you, and eventually, something else comes from it. But I think anybody, I know if I'm capable of it, everybody's capable of it. There's nothing special about me. The only thing that I've ever said, which has probably helped me, is that I've always been attracted to talent. I love talent, and I think I'm pretty good at spotting it. And so whenever I saw somebody that was good or doing something special, I wanted to be part of it.
Yeah.
And that was the draw.
Yeah.
And still is.
Yeah. I mean, and that's part of my excitement for this. I make friends that I think are better than me in this, and that I think will push me, but also make me excited to go to a gig and bump into them.
It's like playing for the best football team, isn't it?
Yeah.
You don't want to play for the shittiest one and be the best player.
Yeah.
You'd probably be the worst player, but play with the best.
Yeah, that's pretty much how I see myself in my friendship circle. Hello, everyone. But it's the thing that you can't look at it and go, all this is against me, and not see that as an opportunity. There's a really good book I started reading, I still haven't finished. It's called The Obstacle is the Way, and it's by Ryan Holiday, and it's all about how whatever obstacles come in front of your path, that's actually the route that life's taking you down, and you don't get a choice in it. And it's sort of it's a whole Buddhist / Zen philosophy thing. It's a bit wanky, I'm aware, when I talk about it like this, but I'm more saying that for people.
I did martial arts for 20 years. I know about Zen.
Oh, okay, fine. I'm more saying it for someone who's probably listening to this, going, he's banging on about Buddhism again. But you take an extra. I went and bought business cards recently, right? That I've got my Twitter handle and my website on and stuff to give away at club nights in case people like me. I take email address at the end of every gig, and I remember I had a full room. I had literally about 80 people in the room 2 nights ago, and one of my friends put a photo up, and he was like, "Oh, how have you done that?" And I was like, "Well, last year I came and I had half rooms, and I took everyone's email addresses and I emailed them and said, 'Could you tell friends?' And a lot of them came because of that, because I said it's my first night. I'd love to have a good opening night. I then emailed a load of businesses down here, so I didn't have to come down and flyer. And I said, 'Can you guys come?' Because it's my, I came back last year and whatever. And last year when I came down, I went to a load of businesses and took names of people, and I wrote to those people specifically, and I just put effort in. And this person said,
"You're your very own enterprise scheme, aren't you?"
Yeah, a little bit, but we haven't got an enterprise scheme.
No, I know.
And I think
maybe you should go out and bang the drum for it.
I'm all right. Well, no, because I think it's got to a stage where you have to do everything your own way, and so a general scheme that just gives you money is not necessarily going to help the situation. I'm not sure.
Where are you? What's your aim? Where are you going with all of this?
With this pod?
Well, with what you do, with your comedy, with the pod, is there a great, Do
you know Hills Jager asked me that the other day?
Well, it's an obvious question, really, isn't it? Because you're going around talking to boring old people like me about what we do. You're obviously involved in stand-up comedy. You want to make it as a stand-up comic. You said that to me last year.
Yeah.
And you're doing this, and you're getting a large number of followers, which you will grow. Can you make a career out of just doing this, or does that lead on to some other form of journalism, or where are you going? Is my question.
I'll tell you what happened. I rang Hills to ask her for a spot at a club because I've never done it, and I don't think she'll mind telling you this. She got a little bit snappy at me because she told me that you have to enter a competition to get a spot there, and then asked me about my 5-year plan, and I said I haven't got one. And she sort of went, "Oh, well, why are you even ringing me? Why, if I'm not on your plan, you don't even, basically got a bit upset." I said upset. She gave me a kick up the arse, which I needed, and I realised, I should probably be doing more. and I don't have a direction.
You don't necessarily. I mean, look, I've never had a 5-year plan or even a 1-year plan. You don't necessarily need a 5-year plan. But I just wondered, somewhere at the back of your head, you kind of know where you're aiming. There's some ambition somewhere. If you can pinpoint it, you can maybe find a path towards it.
I want to get to a stage where I can tour a new hour every year, and outside of that I can do 100, 150 club gigs and make enough money that I could live in a nice place. Well, my
best advice is that you should go abroad as well.
Okay.
Because, Estonia, Latvia, former Yugoslavia, all these places, fantastic gigs, fantastic venues, Scandinavia, Iceland, Poland.
I've got a friend who's from this podcast, in fact, who's in Amsterdam, who messaged me recently asking if I want to come out and do it for 2 days at his place.
Do it.
So I might do that. Yeah. No, I'm more than happy. By the way,
because that will open a lot more doors for you.
If anyone's listening to this and you're in another country and you want to book me, I will go. Like, if you, it's not a problem. But no, I the only reason I haven't chased it is because I've only just got used to like you said, you think you get used to something, all of a sudden it all changes and you think you don't know anything. I felt like I was only just getting used to what's here, so I didn't want to jump into a new pond, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's just that look. I know it's been said before, but look at the Beatles. They made it in Hamburg before they made it in Liverpool. Sometimes you have to step out of your comfort zone and kind of rediscover yourself and be discovered.
There's a film called Searching for Sugar Man. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
it's a singer who...
It's the guy who played... It was a big... in South Africa, they were huge fans.
Where he'd never been.
No. Funnily enough, I watched it on the plane to South Africa.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Okay. And then when I got there, I'd never heard this guy, and I mentioned it, and everybody went, "Oh, yeah. He's huge."
Yeah. No, all this stuff fascinates me. I've literally just finished writing a book about all this subject, because the whole thing fascinates me. But I've only just realised how much of everything in my life has sort of correlated. So from getting the job in social media, from pushing myself in that respect, and then using all those admin skills in comedy, and then using all the networking skills in attempting comedy, and then trying to work out how technology works in comedy, and also my day job is very much the same as my night job. If I don't say something funny on Twitter for a brand, everyone lets you know. If you've got 2,000 people following you, they'll jump on you. If you go on a Junglers on a Saturday night and say something they don't think's funny, they'll fucking shout at you. So there's not that much different between my day and night job, oddly enough.
No. So you do know what you're doing?
Possibly. I know where I want to go, and I'm going to get there, regardless.
You will then. You will.
I don't have anything else to do in life, so...
No, but you just have to be almost fixated.
I've literally just started a video blog called There Is No Plan B, because I wanted to commit to myself and be like, I don't have a plan B anymore.
All the famous people I know have only ever wanted to do what they're doing.
Yeah.
And they've, even when people have said that they're rubbish at it or stupid, and they kept on doing it, eventually they've achieved, because people come round in the end.
Do you want to... I wasn't going to ever tell anyone this, but do you want to know a secret that everyone else could know as well?
Go on.
Yesterday I did.
We all want to know.
Yesterday I did a gig. I did my show, and it didn't go as well as the first night. But this woman came and sort of jumped in and sort of had a go at me because she didn't like some of the material. She said to me that I'd said something quite... what she said, I would have been insulted if I'd said it, basically. It was a comment about how... she said something like, I said I didn't like ugly women or something. And I've never said anything like that on stage. And I asked everyone in the audience, have you...
But she was there and she said that...
She said that, like, in just after the joke. And I did say to everyone, has anyone else read that joke like that? And no one else had. And I said to her, could you quote me what I said to that? And afterwards she came up to me and she just went, can we listen to your recording back for that gig? Yeah. And I was like, not really, there's another show about to start and I've got to go and do a spot somewhere else. And she was like, well, that's, if you haven't got time, you asked for feedback. And I was like, yeah, I didn't ask for it during the, you know what I mean? And it was one of those things where I had to run to another show, and on my way there I was thinking to myself, I need to just shake this person off, because there's no way. I first of all, I don't know an angle that it would be funny.
That's very funny.
And second, except this. And second of all, just you can't let just one person who's misinterpreted something put you off.
No, I shouldn't worry about it and just write some good material around it.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do, but it's for the next show now. But yeah.
Well, that's Brighton for you. Welcome.
all the other people in Brighton have been absolutely lovely, genuinely. Oh well. Right, I tell you what I'm going to do, because we've sort of got sidetracked a bit, but I'm gonna ask you sort of two more general questions and then the fast ones, if that's cool.
Yeah.
Because I was going to ask you if you use social media to research where you.
I feel like I wafted on a bit in the beginning, but you'll have to be the judge of that.
So I'll edit it. The edits are a necessary evil, but I've got used to really liking them now. I don't know why. Okay. It's kind of an odd thing. I was going to ask if you use social media at all to research where you do tours, because obviously if someone's got a big following, the analytics will tell you where their fans are.
No.
But, okay, fair enough. Is there a reason for that?
Because comedy is pretty much universal, so therefore they should be able to play anywhere. Obviously, if you're a comic that emanates from the north, say Manchester, Liverpool, then predominantly you're going to have a larger audience there initially, and you may think when you're booking a tour, okay, well we'll play a 2,000 seat room rather than a 1,000 seat room or whatever, but no more than that.
Okay, fair enough. I won't ask you the follow-up to that because the answer was no to the first bit of it. Right, so these are the quick-fire questions I ask everyone.
Okay.
They're quick-fire for me. You take as long as you like to answer them. What is the best book you've ever read on comedy writing, stand-up, or in your case, touring?
I've never read a book on comedy writing.
Okay.
On touring? Has anybody ever written a book on comedy touring as such? I don't write one. I don't write one. You know that saying, what goes on tour stays on tour?
I tried to pitch an idea of a podcast. I was doing a load of gigs with people, and I tried to pitch an idea of a podcast that we would record the conversations in the car and put them out as unedited podcasts, and everyone was like, what stays in the car doesn't come out of the car.
No, yeah. I mean, after a while, there are just too many stories, aren't there, really?
You can skip the question. It's not.
I suppose the answer to the question is I haven't read the book yet.
Okay.
That's excited me.
Okay. What's the best show you've ever seen?
Quick fire, eh? How can I possibly think of the best show I've ever seen across this many years? Christ. Okay, I'm thinking of Eddie Izzard live at the Ambassadors when I first saw him perform, and he'd just come out, in the last few months or whatever, and I just thought, wow, look at this guy, and then listening to him and just thought nobody else was doing stuff like that. I thought he was quite amazing. So probably that stays in my mind.
What's the biggest mistake you've ever made, and how did you overcome it?
I was touring once with an act called The Right Size, and we were touring every town and city in Belgium and Holland, and there was the name of a venue on the tour book, and it was at least a 5-hour drive from where we were. So we all got up early and we drove through the wind and the rain all the way to this place. And when we got there, we couldn't find the venue, so we went to a post office and we showed her the name of the town and the name of the venue. And then she looked at us and she said, "I'm sorry, but there's 2 cities with this name, and the one that we should have been in was half an hour from where we'd just been."
Wow.
So we had to drive all the way back.
I was going to ask how you overcame it, but I assume the drive of shame.
I was driving.
Oh, right.
I was driving. They were navigating. But yeah, we made the gig by 10 minutes or whatever we had to set up. But yeah, that was a day. Some things just stay in your memory. But there's many shaming moments. I'm not prepared to tell you.
Fair enough. Not on these.
Tell you some of them, no.
What's the most interesting thing you do that nobody ever gets to see?
I think it's discovering acts. Just the sheer joy of seeing something which fills you with delight, and you reaffirm why you're in this business.
Who do you think is the most underrated person in the industry? It can be a performer or an industry person. Yeah.
Gosh, that's a real tough question.
It's my favourite one to ask.
Because I'm from this side, and so I would say the most underrated people are the people who put so much care and effort into actually producing a tour, booking the tour, making sure it's the right venue, getting the best deal that they can get, and making sure an audience arrives there. And once the act arrives on the stage, everything is sorted. There's nothing they have to worry about. I think that person, for me, is probably the star of it outside of the act.
And you don't want to name anyone specific, or?
or my staff.
Okay, fair enough. I hope they listen to this. Oh, I hope they just skip to that bit and go like that. What do you think is the biggest problem in the comedy industry, and how would you go about solving it?
The biggest problem in the comedy industry, I think, is harking back to the other question about overexposure on TV. I think that it's created a sort of couch potato audience. And look, I work in the live. I just want people to go and see live. There's been a lot of local clubs closed down in the last year or two. There's a lot of small theatres that have closed down. And we need to somehow get people off their arses and back out there seeing. And I think the only way they're going to do that is if we have less comedy on TV, generally.
What's the best bit of advice you've ever been given?
The best bit of advice I've ever been given, that from my first profit, buy your office. And I did just that.
Who gave you that?
A man called the wonderful, lovely Andrzej Pazinski.
And if you could go back to your 20-year-old self and give you one bit of advice, what would you say?
God,
Get that fucking address right.
I just realised how little I knew at 20. Oh, so many things. I mean, there's so many things. What would I say? The one bit of advice I'd say to myself. Okay, the one bit of advice I'd say to myself at 20 is, don't worry, it'll be fine.
Yeah, I can. That's something I wish I'd told myself way before I was 20. But yeah. Have you got any last nuggets of advice you'd like to give to a couple of thousand comedians?
I think that the best advice I can give is that you should believe in yourself totally. Listen to your friends, maybe not all of them. Talk to industry people and speak to those who you know will be honest. It's easy to give people bullshit, and it's sometimes hard to take the truth, but within that there should be positive criticism. You can extract the negative if you so choose, but there'll be positive criticism in there as well. And really, really, really give 100% to every performance you do, and enjoy your audience. Even if they don't get you or particularly like you, enjoy them.
Well, thank you very much for coming on.
Pleasure. Thank you.
That was Mick Perrin. I really enjoyed chatting to him. He sort of called me out a bit near the end, as you would have heard, and I quite like it when the guest does that. I quite like it when they're sort of engaged in the dialogue and sort of curious as to why I'm even doing this, because my original reason for doing this has sort of gone out the window, and I've carried on doing it because I genuinely enjoy it, and I genuinely actually sort of... That makes it sound like I wasn't enjoying it in the first place. I genuinely enjoy it, and I genuinely enjoy meeting people in the industry who have done this for so long, because I would like to think in 20 years I'll still be in the industry doing stuff. So yeah, it's just quite nice to hear their stories and where they've come from and what they do and how they make a living. So I'm enjoying it. If you like this episode, please check out the live podcast, which is episode 32, which we did at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival last year. That's got Mick Perrin in, as well as PRs and touring agents. And basically, if you're enjoying and looking into going on a tour, that should be something you should check out. I've also got a podcast episode with Sam Brady, which is episode 51, which is a few pods ago, where he organised his own tour, and that's worth listening to as well. If you're enjoying the show and getting any value out of it, as I said, please join the Facebook group. It means you can discover guests with a bit announced. And also, if you would like to support the podcast and keep it going, please do think about leaving me a one-off donation via PayPal on my website, or a per pod donation on Patreon. You can do it from as little as $1, which is 80p an episode. That would really help out. It really does make a massive difference, and it really helps me get a budget for the show and keep it going, and all the things I keep banging on about. But genuinely, it would just be great if I could get up to X amount of patrons and X amount of budget, which means that this might even break even one day. So if you would like to support this project and you get any value out of it at all, and you can help out, don't do it if you can't. A lot of podcast people say, please donate, and never actually point out that you don't have to donate if you can't, and if you can't donate, I'd rather you didn't, because I really don't want anyone else going into debt for this project than me. But if you can afford it, and you can just bung me a quid or something, please do. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for joining the Facebook group. Thank you very much for sharing the podcast if you do that, and thank you very much for donating. I will see you in about 10 days' time. Bye!